So let's start today's video with a small exercise, shall we? For that, let's close our eyes for a second. And let's imagine that you are a creative in a world-renowned movie studio. And one day, you have lunch with your friends from the accounting team, and you tell them about this idea you just had for a film. And it's about this mermaid who dreams about becoming human. And your friends go, well, that sounds crazy, but mermaids don't exist. And another one goes, why would you want to be human? And you go, well, because she saved this prince in a shipwreck and then she fell in love with him and he was human. And some other friend goes, but how the hell will she become human? I mean, she's a mermaid. And you go, well, because there's this witch. But you can't finish your sentence because someone else interrupts you and goes, well, I just talked to Walt yesterday and we won't develop any new projects for teenage girls this year. So I guess that you and I would agree that this is not how creative ideas come to life, right? Yet this is how we so often treat our creative treasures. Maybe we wake up in the morning, have an amazing new idea for our business, but instead of letting it unfold, we tell our friends about it, or maybe our partner, and maybe they just don't get it right away. Or even worse, we let our inner critic go wild on it before we even put it on paper. And so if you ever felt stuck before starting a new business idea, or you're overthinking your branding efforts, you want to keep watching because I'm going to share with you an exercise that kicks me out of any creative rut. And so this exercise was inspired by Walt Disney. It's even called the Disney Creative Strategy, and it was developed by Robert Dills in 1994. Let's get right to it. And for that, let's get back to our lunch scene. And what I want you to imagine is that Walt, the CEO of the company, actually overheard your conversation and was intrigued by your idea. So he asks you to come to his office and bring your creative team and pitch the idea again. And what happens is that this becomes this huge brainstorming session where he constantly asks you questions like, what would make this scene more interesting? And you tell him about the sea witch and the little red crab with a Jamaican accent. And he listens patiently. And then he proceeds to write down all of your cool ideas and calls this the dreamer space. And so the dreamer space would be where all creatives can go wild and come up with the dream solution for each part of the project. This space is all about what would be the most out of the box, most original, most interesting way to do things. And after this meeting would finish, Walt would take his best project managers to come with him to another meeting room. And he would show all of your storyboards with all of your original ideas, and he would ask them to come up with a plan. And he would constantly ask things like, how can we make this happen? How would this work? The crab, yes, it has a Jamaican accent. Who do we hire for this? And they would start to create this huge project plan. And so the realist space is where you'd create an actionable plan for your creative idea. And then he would take the project plan and he would invite all of the accountants and producers to another meeting room. And he would make them look at those plans. And he would ask, where do you find weak spots? And this would be the critic space. And the critic space would exist to make sure the project is actually manageable. And this is where you would talk numbers and resources, and if something wouldn't add up, he would go back to the realists again. And if they couldn't come up with a solution, only then he would go back to the dreamer space and see if they can come up with alternative creative ideas. And so as you can see, it would become this cycle. The dreamers would create a vision, the realists would create a plan, and the critics would make sure the plan was actually bulletproof. Now, what's important to understand about this exercise is that under no circumstances you would put the dreamer and the critic together to discuss the vision, because that's just not how creativity works. On the other hand, it gives the constructive critics some credit because they do play an important role sometimes. They make sure the project is manageable. And so how can you use this technique, especially if you're a one-man or one-woman show and you have this creative idea that you really want to make a reality? So for example, if you want to start adding a new service to your business, or you want to begin to produce some content for your platform, what you can do is you can take one journal for each stage. Remember, dreamer, realist, and let's call it constructive critic. And in the dreamer's journal, you start jotting down the craziest, wildest ideas without holding back. And here's some questions for that. What are some original ideas for this project? If there were absolutely no limits, what would I do? How can I bring a whole new spin to something that already exists? And once you're done writing out your creative vision, you can take the realist journal. And I would strongly suggest you to take a break, go for a walk between the dreamers and the realist phase. And once your mind is refreshed, you can start making your plan. And here's some questions for that. What resources do I have to make this happen? Which ones do I need to learn, buy, or hire for this? How much time would I need for this? What would a prototype look like? How would some actionable first steps for this plan look like? And once you're done creating your solid plan, you can take your third journal, the one for the constructive critic. And again, make sure to create some breaks between the phases so you're in the right headspace. And next, you take those actionable steps and you look at them and you ask yourself in all honesty, what are some potential roadblocks in this plan? How can I overcome them? Is this plan as polished and effective as it can be? And as I mentioned before, you can go through this cycle a few times until you have the perfectly achievable plan. And what will happen is that once you see the actionable steps right in front of you, it will become so much easier to get started. And of course, always remember, never put the dreamer and the critic together to discuss the vision. That's not how things get done. Okay? Great. You guys, I hope this exercise will help you push forward with your creative ideas. If you enjoyed this video today, you might want to check out the one I have just right here. Take care and I'll catch you soon. Bye.